The starship Aurolite drifted through the silver tides of the Lyra sector, carrying delegates from 10 species toward the Triune Concord Summit. It was a grand event, a meeting that only occurred once every orbital cycle, drawing the finest minds, artists, strategists, and diplomats from known space. Among them was a small group of humans from Terra, invited as junior observers. Most were scholars or technicians, but one of them, a quiet girl named Lena, stood out not because of her presence, but because of her silence. Lena had joined the mission as part of the cultural research team. She was young, soft-spoken, and often lost in her own thoughts. Her peers believed she was too timid to contribute meaningfully. They rarely invited her to discussions, and never imagined she carried any skill of value. To them she was only a quiet figure absorbed in her notepad, never raising her head unless spoken to. The ship featured a grand exhibition hall, a shining chamber filled with artifacts, instruments, sculptures, and displays representing each species. It was a place where delegates showcased the finest expressions of their culture. At the center sat a crystalline podium that held ancient musical instruments, restored from the archives of lost worlds. Among them was a polished piano from old Earth, placed there as a courtesy to the human team. It was a relic preserved from a forgotten era, gleaming under blue lights. One evening, as delegates moved through the hall, a crowd gathered around the podium. A famed pianist from the Dorian cluster was giving a lecture about multi-tonal instrumentation across species. Tall, elegant, and widely respected, the performer carried an air of pride that bordered on arrogance. Many admired this figure for unmatched skill, but there were whispers that this performer rarely acknowledged. Anyone seen as less talented. Lina wandered into the hall carrying her notes. She saw the piano and felt her chest warm at the sight. She had grown up playing on an old keyboard her guardian had repaired from scraps. Music had always been her refuge, a memory of Earth that felt alive whenever she touched the keys. On the ship she had no place to practice, and she longed for the comfort of a familiar instrument. The crowd was silent as the renowned performer lectured about universal harmony. Lena drifted closer, drawn to the piano like a thread pulling her forward. Without thinking, she reached out and placed her fingers gently on one of the ivory keys. The soft sound echoed through the hall. Every head turned. The performer paused mid-sentence, eyes narrowing sharply. A murmur swept through the onlookers. Several humans stepped back, startled by her boldness. One of them whispered that she should not have touched such an instrument during an official demonstration. Another hissed that she was embarrassing their team. The performer approached Lena with slow steps, hands clasped behind a shimmering robe. When the figure reached her, the hall grew tense. "So the silent one wants to play," the performer said in a tone dipped with mockery. Lina met the gaze but said nothing. The performer continued, "Tell me, girl, have you trained in the polyharmonic disciplines of the Dorian arts? Or do you only know the crude scales of your home planet?" Several delegates chuckled. Human researchers stepped forward and muttered that Lena did not speak much and was unlikely to know advanced theory. The performer smirked and swept an arm toward the piano. "Then perhaps she wishes to entertain us with a simple melody. Something fitting for a child who wandered too close to the stage." The mockery hung in the air. Lina did not flinch. Instead, she quietly took the bench. Her hands rested on the keys in a posture too natural, too practiced for someone inexperienced. The performer noticed this and raised a brow but said nothing. The crowd leaned in, expecting a clumsy attempt that would justify the ridicule. Lena inhaled once. Then she played. The sound burst forth like a sunrise, breaking through fog. Her fingers flowed across the keys with precision and emotion, weaving a melody that felt both new and ancient. It was not a simple tune. It was a sweeping piece she had composed in secret, drawing from classical Earth influences. mixed with her own interpretations of cosmic harmonics she had studied during the mission. The hall fell silent. Every note danced through the chamber with a clarity that touched every listener. Aliens with no understanding of human music felt emotions stir within their chests. The human researchers stared in disbelief. The performer who had mocked her stood frozen, unable to process the transformation before them. Lena's quiet demeanor had hidden a mastery none of them had imagined. Her hands moved with the ease of someone who had lived inside music for years. Her posture shifted between intensity and grace, her movements telling a story of longing, wonder, and resilience. She played as if the universe itself flowed through her fingertips. Delegates stepped closer, drawn by a pull they could not resist. Representatives from distant planets who had never heard a piano felt the weight of the piece. Some placed hands on their chests as the melody rose. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them like a tide dot as the final note rang out. Lingering in the air like a falling star, the hall remained silent for several long seconds. Then came the applause. It started with a single delegate from a crystalline species whose hands chimed like glass. Then another joined. Soon the entire hall thundered with applause. Lena stood from the bench, cheeks slightly flushed. She did not bow. She simply stepped back from the piano with the calm expression she always carried. The performer approached her, but the arrogance once held was gone. "What was that piece?" the performer asked quietly. "A memory," Lena said. "A memory of what? Home." The performer looked at the piano and then at her. Something like respect flickered in the eyes. "You hid this talent well," the performer said. "I was not asked," Lena replied. Whispers spread through the hall. Delegates hailed her as a rising star of human culture. The human researchers who had doubted her stared as if seeing her for the first time. They stepped toward her with awkward smiles and stammered attempts at praise. Lena acknowledged them politely, but remained reserved. The Summit Council soon heard of the performance. They requested her presence at the Central Forum to perform during the closing ceremony. Such an honor had never been granted to a junior human observer. The council believed the piece she played symbolized the unity the summit sought to strengthen. The night before the ceremony, Lena sat alone in her room. She held a small metal charm, the last relic of her guardian who had first introduced her to music. She rubbed the surface gently and whispered a quiet promise that she would honor the lessons given to her. She closed her eyes and imagined the ceremony hall, filled with delegates from across the stars. The next day, the forum was crowded. A large circular platform floated at the center of the chamber with lights that shifted like waves. Every species had a representative in attendance. The piano had been moved to the middle, glowing under the soft lights. Lena stepped onto the platform. Her simple attire contrasted with the ceremonial garments worn by others, yet she carried herself with calm confidence. When she sat at the piano, the chamber settled into silence. She began her second performance with a soft, lingering chord. The sound resonated across the chamber like a whisper carried on cosmic winds. She transitioned into a new composition, one she had completed the night before. It was gentle, hopeful, and filled with the warmth she associated with Earth. Yet it blended tones she had heard from alien cultures during the summit. Creating a bridge between worlds, delegates leaned forward to listen. Her melody flowed like a river, weaving through plains of harmony. Each passage carried an emotion that transcended language. Listeners sensed unity, courage, and the quiet strength of humanity. They felt the message she spoke through music. Humans, though young in the galactic community, possessed a depth that reached far beyond what many had assumed. This was the essence of HFY. Humanity rising not through conquest or dominance, but through creativity, emotion, and the ability to touch hearts across species. Lena embodied that truth with every note she played. When she finished, the silence broke into a standing ovation. Even species that lacked the concept of standing rose in their own cultural gestures of honor. The council chairperson stepped forward and declared that her performance would be recorded in the summit archives as a symbol of awe. Interstellar unity. After the ceremony, delegates lined up to greet her. Some asked about human music. Others requested copies of her compositions. The performer who had mocked her earlier approached with a humble bow and offered an apology. Lena accepted it with a small nod. As the ship continued its voyage after the summit, humans across the galaxy replayed her performance, inspired by the quiet girl who had carried a hidden gift. For the first time, many recognized that the strength of their species was not measured in technology or dominance, but in their capacity to express emotion and create beauty. Lena returned to her quarters and sat by the window. She watched the stars drift past like glowing seeds. Her fingers traced the air as if playing invisible keys. She smiled softly. She knew now that she would continue to share her music with the galaxy, not for applause or recognition, but to show that even the quietest person could shape the future. All it took was a moment of courage and a single note played with heart. The piano aboard the Aurolite remained in the exhibition hall, no longer a relic to be admired from afar, but a living symbol of connection. Delegates from various species took turns touching its keys, attempting to recreate the feelings Lena inspired. None succeeded fully, but each found joy in trying. Lena continued her work on the ship. She joined cultural discussions with newfound confidence. Her peers who once overlooked her now sought her input. She did not flaunt her talent, but carried it with quiet grace. When asked about her past, she would only say that she learned to play because music helped her understand the world. In time, she composed pieces dedicated to the friendships she formed during the mission. Each composition carried elements of different species, blending human emotion with alien tonal structures. Delegates praised these creations as the birth of a new form of interstellar art. During one gathering, the council chairperson approached Lena and offered her a position as an ambassador of human culture. It was an unprecedented honor. Lena hesitated at first, unsure if she was ready for such responsibility. But when she thought about the impact her music had already made, she accepted. Her role was not to negotiate treaties or strategize policies, but to represent humanity through the arts. She traveled to distant worlds carrying only her notes, her calm presence, and her unwavering passion for music. In every place she visited, her performances opened doors to deeper understanding between species. Some planets had never heard music created by humans and were moved to quiet reflection. Others adapted human melodies into their own traditions. A few even built new instruments inspired by the piano she played aboard the Aurolite. Years passed, and Lena became known across the galaxy. Yet she never changed from the quiet girl she had always been. She remained humble, soft-spoken, and devoted to her craft. People admired her, not only for her talent, but for her sincerity. The performer who once mocked her often invited her to collaborative concerts in major cultural centers. They performed side by side, blending their styles into breathtaking harmonies. Their partnership became a symbol of growth, forgiveness, and the ability to learn from mistakes. Lena's story spread across human colonies. Young artists looked to her as proof that even those who were underestimated could rise to greatness. Schools taught her compositions. Cultural groups analyzed her techniques. Families played her pieces at celebrations to honor unity. One day, when Lena returned to Earth for a short visit, she stood in a quiet garden, surrounded by the warm glow of evening light. She thought back to the day she first touched the piano aboard the Aurolite. She remembered the laughter that followed and the uncertainty she felt. Yet she also remembered the courage that guided her. To sit at the bench. She touched the charm in her pocket and whispered a small thank you to her guardian. Then she closed her eyes and listened to the wind rustling through the trees. It sounded like the beginning of a new melody. When she opened her eyes, she smiled faintly. Her journey had only begun, and across the galaxy, the echoes of her music continued to inspire countless lives, reminding all species that humanity's greatest strength lay not in power but in heart.